Hey everybody, welcome to this week's video and blog. I'm going to do things a little different this week as this blog and video is longer. So for years, I just had to be right, even when I was wrong. Can anybody relate? I mean, maybe you know somebody like this. Maybe you're sitting with them right now. But this week, I want to share about how I quit trying to be right all the time. And this comes from the blog that I wrote, the 10 things I quit that made a huge difference in my life. So back in 2004, Chris and I started going to marriage counseling. This was right after I'd quit drinking, and we were hoping that we could fix our marriage, get our life back on track, and get things back more to the way they used to be, because there was a lot of damage done. And what I mean by damage done is all the words and hurt that I had caused my wife over the past 22 years. You combine that with the death of our son Joey and damage occurs. It was a big day because Chris had been given the task of writing down the things that I did that specifically hurt her and caused the major damage in our relationship over the years. We sat down, we did the normal warm-up stuff, and then Claire asked Chris, "Are you ready?" Chris pulled out a paper, but before I share the words that were in ink on that paper, I want to paint a picture of who Chris was. You see, when I met Chris, she was so alive. She was vibrant. I mean, her face shined with joy and happiness every time you would see her. She was not a talker per se, but she would engage in deep conversation. And I'll tell you, she walked with confidence. She believed in herself. She believed in life. And she believed in the love of life. But back to the counseling session, Chris was different now. She didn't look happy. She didn't walk with any confidence. She didn't act like she was full of joy. She was definitely not a talker any longer. She had lost her zest for life and for love. It was like she had lost her spirit. She reminded me of a turtle who, when I came around or certain people came around, she would retract back into her shell. And then when she felt it was safe to come out, she'd come back out. But even then, she wasn't Chris anymore. As she started reading this letter, she said, "It's like my heart is glass, and you've ripped it out of my chest and threw it on the floor, and it shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. And we are now going to pick up all the pieces and glue them back together. But the cracks will always be there." And then she proceeded to share the things that were on the paper that I had done to her that had hurt her in our relationship and caused all that damage over the years. Now, my responsibility was to listen to her and try to hear her heart. And this was all new to me. This was not a time for me to justify things, to deflect, or to come up with excuses. It was a time for me to listen to my wife. Now, I'll tell you, the more she shared, the more difficult this became for me. And I'm not talking about the deflection or excuse part, but I'm talking about the listening part, because suddenly something happened in this moment and I started to hear my wife's heart. I started to see the damage that I had done. And as tears started running down my face, I realized that this was the same person that I stood face to face with and did wedding vows. It's the same person that I used to look at and melt. The same person that I would lay awake in bed at night during our dating years and think about for hours. Also, the same person that consumed me in my every thought immediately after I met her in the hallway in junior high. So I spent the next several years learning how to not have to be right all the time. Though I will admit and tell you that sometimes I still want to and try to be right. But I want to fast forward about 10 years. Chris and I had just done a pretty aggressive cardio workout together, and we decided that we were going to go to the farm and visit her horse Cowboy. So we were heading down 340 down the highway and enjoying the scenery on a sunny day, and I looked over at my wife, and she had had her hand on her heart. And I immediately said, "Are you okay, sweetheart? Do you have chest pains? Is your heart okay?" And my wife looked at me and her eyes glistened with the sun coming through the windshield. And she smiled and she said, "Oh no, honey. Today I'm good. My heart is whole." And in a split second, I was reminded of the memory when she said the cracks will always be there. And as tears started streaming down my face again. I will say that I'm a crier today. I get very emotional. I'm okay with that. But immediately, tears started streaming down my face. I looked at my bride and told her of the memory that I was just reminded of. And as we talked, we both realized that the cracks were in fact gone and that her heart was whole. So I want to digress a moment because I meet with a lot of men and they spend some time complaining to me about their wives. And at the appropriate time, I will say, "She sounds like a mess. I mean, why'd you marry her?" And they normally say, "Well, when I met her and married her, she wasn't that way. She was different." So I say, is it possible then that you made her this way? Now, I want to say that I am not saying that it's all the husband's fault and responsibility. It takes two for a healthy relationship. But I will say for us and our story, it was mostly me and the way I treated and chose to treat and talk to my wife over the years. Now, there's two main points that I want to focus on with this. And the first one is, I was sitting with my mentor one day and he said to me, "Kyle, one of these days, you are going to have to let Chris be Chris and stop trying to make her who you want her to be." As I think about this, isn't it amazing how many of us marry someone only to work to try to make them who and how we think they should be? Point number two. Earlier I said that we wanted to get our marriage back on track in the way that it used to be. Well, we learned that our marriage is better than we could have ever imagined today. It's been that way for a long time. With the right attitude, the right people, the right tools, we all have a choice to become a better me. A better me of who I am today, a better me of who I want to be tomorrow. Thanks for visiting this week. I hope you'll consider visiting again next week. I'm going to share about how I quit blaming myself for the death of our son Kyle Jr. And I'm going to share a story titled "The Miracle of Forgiving." Go out and make it a change week. God bless you.